Alright guys, so as you can see we've got something a little bit different with this one. So I'm mixing it up a bit because this is a pretty special video, because I'm going to be releasing this on the 5th anniversary of my channel. I can't believe it's been 5 years already, it's gone so quickly. And I just want to say a massive thank you to everyone who supported the channel over those 5 years. So we're going to be comparing Jody from Just One More Watch, his first watch, the Erebus Origin, to Gary from I Like Watches' first watch, which was the JF Exciton. And we're going to try and figure out who did it best. Who had the best first watch. So we're going to break this down into different categories and then score them all out of 10. So the highest you can possibly get is going to be 80 because we've got 8 different categories. But enough waffling, let's get right down into this, starting with probably the most subjective category of the lot, and that's design. Who had the most unique overall design? With the Origin, that's a pretty traditional standard kind of diver, which has taken inspiration from quite a few different similar watches, so you can definitely see it's not that original. Not that that's necessarily a bad thing, especially for your first watch. But when it comes to the Exciton, I definitely think that's more unique. As I say, it's more of a Garda style, and I think it just has some more unique design elements throughout, which you will see when we go through this properly. But showing them more clearly side by side now, you can probably see some of those similarities coming in already. So they both have textured dials, and they both have fully printed ones as well, so no applied indices on either. And the only real difference in terms of the actual dials is the fact that the Origin has got a printed minute track, whereas the Exciton only has that on the bezel. In terms of the branding, again, that's all printed. So you've got the JF logo on the Exciton, and then with the Erebus, you've got the logo and the Erebus text underneath. Then we've got the brand name, the Exciton and Origin, and then 200 meter water resistance on both, as well as that splash of colour, the purple on the Exciton and the red on the Origin. But with the Origin, they have actually continued that red theme onto the second hand, and also a little bit on the dial too, just on the outside of those indices, just tying it in a bit better I think. And the other big difference being the date windows, so we've got it down at the 6 and colour matched on the Erebus, which is a nice bonus. Now moving on to the bracelets though, let's talk about them. So starting with the Exciton, we've got a really nice engineer style bracelet with this one. Articulates really nicely, so conforms the wrist really well. Nicely finished too, and we have actually got screw links on that. And it's got a fully brushed finish, but it does still play with the light quite nicely. Moving on to the clasp, got no branding on there, but this does come with some straight end links as well, so you can wear it on another watch too. Got 4 levers on micro adjust, double pushers, milled clasp. Then getting onto the case back, it's definitely pretty unique with those conversions on there, and it ties in nicely with the name of the watch as well. And if you want to know more about all that, I'll leave a link to the full review up in the top, and also down in the description. The only thing is I just wish it had been brushed instead of polished, because it is a bit of a fingerprint magnet and does gather scratches a bit too. Moving on to the Origin now, this has also got a really nice bracelet as well, really nicely finished. Nice articulation too, fully brushed again, and again we've got screw links. Getting onto the clasp, this is where things change though, so we've actually got the branding on there with the logo, do like that, and we haven't got any micro adjust, so double pushers, milled clasp, and we have actually got an on the fly adjustable clasp, so that is a nice bonus. Definitely a step above just having the micro adjust. When it comes to the case back, we've got that nicely embossed logo there, that kind of bee-blasted, sandblasted finish in between, and then the usual kind of specs you get around the outside. But then we've also got a quick release bracelet, which is a really nice touch, so if you do want to swap it out you can do quickly and easily. The Exciton doesn't have that, but it does actually have drilled lugs, so you can still swap it out pretty quickly and easily as well. So the next thing we're going to talk about you might have already noticed already, but if you haven't, I'll get them a bit closer so you can hopefully see. So one of these has actually got a high beat movement, and that is the Exciton. So that's got the Miyota 9015, whereas the Origin has only got an NH35. They both work just fine, but the Miyota is just a bit more premium. But now let's move on to the bezels and talk about them in a bit more detail. Starting with the Exciton, so it's a 120 click ceramic bezel. No back play at all. It's quite notchy, and it is on the tighter side as well. And when it comes to the alignment, that's fine as well, no problems with that. And it's a really nice grippy bezel as well, got a really nice coin edge on it. Now moving on to the Origin, again 120 click ceramic bezel, but very different sounding. No backplay still though, and it is actually a little bit lighter than the Exciton. And when it comes to the alignment, again, no problems with that. So it's just going to come down to what your preference is really. As again, we've also got a nice coin edge bezel on this one too, as well as it also having that signed crown, the same as the Exciton does too. So next up we've got the Lume, and you know Jody's big on his Lume, so is this going to win over the Exciton? So you can see we've got a bit there already, but let's charge them both up, give them a fair chance. And there we go. So we've got the Origin on the left and the Exciton on the right. And as you'd probably expect, because we've got more surface area on those hands and indices, the Erebus is glowing a bit brighter. But otherwise, they're fairly even, at least to begin with. And the same goes for the bezel as well. But we've not got any patchiness on either of them. But the question as always is, how long are they going to last? So let's speed this up now and find out. So, not a great deal of change to begin with, but you will see that the indices and that bezel will fade quicker on the Exciton. The Lume pip's still not looking too bad, and the hands are still pretty good, but the Origin is definitely holding up a lot better. Considering they're both fully printed dials, it's actually a surprisingly stark difference between the two. But would you expect anything else from Mr. Lume Wars Jody himself? But as I say, at least the hands on the Exciton are still pretty good, so it is still usable at least. So hopefully you can see, there are positives and negatives with both, and they are actually surprisingly similar in quite a few ways. But now let's get on to one of the most important things when it comes to a watch, and how does it wear on wrist. So we'll start with the Exciton first, and then we'll go on to the Origin. And here's what the Exciton looks like on my 7-inch wrist. So I think it wears really nicely. I love the way the light plays with that bracelet. It would have been nice to have an on-the-fly adjustable clasp, but we have got a decent level of micro adjust, so you can still get a good fit. And again, it doesn't have branding because it does come with flat end links, so you can wear it on a different watch as well, which is a nice little bonus. It's a nice legible dial as well. And again, I just love the way the light catches all the little surfaces and just kind of brings it alive. And when it comes to the head of the watch and how it fits on wrist, with that curvature to the lugs. And don't forget, we've also got drilled lugs as well, so if you do want to swap the bracelet out, you can do quickly and easily. And I just think it wears really nicely. Got that flat sapphire crystal, the nice detailing on that coin edge bezel. It's a smart looking piece, I think. And depending on the lighting conditions and the angle, you will notice that textured dial more or less. But one of the main positives with this one is that Miyota 9015 high beat movement. So you'll get that really nice smooth sweep at the second hand, as well as just some of those unique design touches that you aren't going to see any other watch. But now let's check out the Origin and see how that wears on wrist and how it compares. And here's that on my 7-inch wrist. So again, plays with the light quite nicely, that bracelet, despite being fully brushed. But when it comes to the clasp, this is where the big difference comes in. So we've got the on-the-fly adjustment so you can get the perfect fit, and we've also got that branding on there as well. And when it comes to the dial, again, we've got that textured one, so depending on the lighting, you will notice that more sometimes than others. And when it comes to the legibility, this is even more legible than the Exciton, because it's just got larger indices and hands. And even though we've got the larger case, it does still wear nicely on my 7-inch wrist, because we've got a little bit of curvature there, and also those female end links too. And again, we've got that flat sapphire crystal, same as the Exciton, and that nice coin edge bezel, but it is a bit thinner than the one on the Exciton. So now that you've seen both of them on wrist, and then we've gone through all the different categories, it's coming down to the point where we need to do the scores, total them all up, and see who comes out as the winner. And when we do this, if you want to do your own scores as we're going along, see how close you get to mine, see if yours vary, see if you get a different winner. As I'd be interested to know down in the comments if you do want to do that. So the first one is going to be the design. This is probably the one that's going to be the most subjective, but for me personally, I'm going to give the Exciton an 8, because it's just got some really nice unique design touches I've not seen in any other watches, including that case back. And I think it just feels overall just a more unique piece when compared to the Origin. So for the Origin, I'm going to give that a 7. So next up, we've got the more specific ones. We're starting with the dial. So as I said, they're pretty similar. They're both textured dials, both fully printed. The only real difference between the two is the fact that we've actually got that minute track on the Origin, whereas the Exciton doesn't actually have that, which is a little bit of a negative. I personally would have liked to have seen applied indices on both, so because of that, I'm going to give the Exciton a 7 and the Origin a 7.5. Moving on to the bracelet and clasp, I could have done these separately, but I've put them in together. So I really like the bracelet on the Exciton, that engineer style bracelet. Really articulates nicely, conforms to wrist really well. The only thing that really lets it down is the fact that we don't have an on-the-fly adjustable clasp. We have got those drilled lugs, so if you do want to swap it out, you can do fairly easily as well. And we do also get those flat end links that come with it, so if you want to put it on a different watch, you can do that. So I do appreciate that. It's a nice little touch that you don't see very often. So I'm going to give that an 8 overall, and then when it comes to the Origin, because we've got that on the fly adjustable clasp, and also the quick release on the bracelet, I'm going to give that a 9. Now getting onto the case back. So these are very different, and as I said, the one on the Exciton is pretty unique, but there is something that I'm not really that keen on, and that's the fact that it's fully polished, so it does scratch and gather smudges and stuff quite easily. Would have been nice if it had been brushed instead. And it's definitely got a really unique design on it. It's not just a list of specs that you normally get on most watches, and it ties in with the name of the watch too, so it is actually functional as well as tying in with the theme of the overall watch. So I'm going to give that a 7.5, and then when it comes to the Origin, that's a pretty traditional kind of style case back, but it's a really nicely done one. So we have got that embossed logo on there with that contrasting sandblasted or bead-blasted finish in between. So I'm going to give that an 8 overall. So it does just pip it, mainly because that Exciton has that polished case back, which I just don't really like. Now getting onto the movement, you've probably figured out what this one's going to be. So obviously I prefer the Miyota 9015 in the Exciton, because not only is it thinner, it's also high beat as well. So it's just an overall more premium feeling movement when compared to the fairly standard NH35 that you get in a lot of different watches now. So I'm going to give the Exciton a 9 and the Origin a 7. Moving on to the bezels. So this is a fairly subjective one, as I said. So it's going to depend what your preference is really. For me personally, I prefer the one on the Origin. It's slightly lighter feeling, and I just prefer the sound of it, to be honest. So I'm going to give the Exciton an 8 and the Origin an 8.5. But now let's get onto the Lume, because this is going to be quite a big one in terms of points. So you probably know where I'm going to go with this one. So the Exciton, because it's got the fairly poor lume on the indices and on the bezel, that's only going to get a 7, whereas the Origin in comparison, despite it being a fully printed dial, the same as the Exciton, it's got a fantastic lume, not only on the hands but also on those indices and the bezel. So I'm going to give that a 9. It's really impressive for a fully printed dial. And now the final category is going to be how it wears on wrist. So as I said, this is probably one of the most important things when you're looking at a watch. How is it going to wear? You can have all the great specs and great looks, but if it doesn't wear right on your wrist, it's no good at all. So despite the different sizes between these, the Exciton being 38mm and the Origin being 41, they both wear really nicely on wrist, I think. The curvature on the cases helps, and also those female end links. And the bracelets both conform to wrist really nicely too. So the only real thing that differentiates them and makes one slightly better than the other is the fact that we've got that on the fly adjustable clasp on the Origin. Yeah, we've got a good amount of micro adjust on the Exciton, but it's just not as good as having on the fly. So because of that, I'm going to give the Exciton an 8.5 and the Origin a 9. So now if we total all those up, and unless I've made a mistake, the Exciton scores a 63 out of 80, but the Origin just beats it with 65 out of 80. So the win goes to Jody and just one more watch. But it's surprisingly close, or at least I have it surprisingly close anyway. But let me know down in the comments. How did you score it? Who was your winner? So hopefully you enjoyed this, guys. Something a little bit different. Thought I'd mix it up a bit for this kind of special milestone on the channel of being 5 years. And who knows, perhaps one day I'll have my own watch as well. But anyway, thanks for watching. Thanks for the continued support over these 5 years. And I'll see you in the next one.